What's going on, friends and fam? Thank you guys so much for watching or listening to Every Day's a Saturday with your host, me, myself, and I, Brian Roof. Hey, guys, another great day, another great episode. Today's episode is episode 24, Losing My Best Friend, My Dad. But before we get into today's episode, guys, let's talk about a couple of things. One being, did you guys like the new intro to the show? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Also, if you guys are watching this, you guys can listen to me on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, basically all the different podcast platforms that play, any type of podcast shows. You can catch me on there. If you guys are listening to this and you want to watch the show, you guys can catch me on YouTube. And also, if you haven't joined the Facebook group, head over there on Facebook and look me up. Every day is a Saturday, USMC veteran, and get onto the group and enjoying some of the fun. We post some, funny jokes, memes. There's also really great, important information on there. Also, I don't want to forget Gun Room Radio. If you guys haven't had the chance to check that out, go check out Gun Room Radio. And they have their own, you can get an app, and they also have a website. So you're able to watch, and listen. You can listen. And they actually have a live show, too, that you can check them out on YouTube. But anyhow, if you want to listen to some veterans, play music and support veterans, check that out. It's a great one. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get in today's episode.
Hey, we got fish, 3 fish in a half an hour. Woohoo! Yeah! Okay. All righty, cool fish. Woohoo!
What's going on, friends and family? All right, let's go ahead and get in today's episode 24, Losing My Best Friend, My Dad. All right, friends and fam, this one might be a little bit rough for me. We'll see how it goes. I lost my dad back in January of 19th, 2020. He was, like I said, how the title goes, he was my dad and he was also my best friend. This is the guy right here. If you guys can't tell, he was a super big New Orleans Saints fan. As you can see here, got a tattoo. Who dat? Pops. Shit's all flabby nowadays. But anyways, my dad, let's get to talking about my dad. He was born May 28th, 1962. And he came from New Orleans, Louisiana. That's where he was born. And then eventually ended up out in the Antelope Valley. And I'll kind of get to talking a little bit of, the things that I do know and the stories that I've heard. I do know that my dad, obviously, he came from my grandmother and his dad. And they had a really bad separation. My dad ended up, kind of stuck there with his mom, and he was there with 2 kids, a single mom. I guess my grandfather had taken off and left them, and she was basically left to fend for 3 kids, single mom, 3 kids, no job. So I guess they had to rely heavily upon the Mormon church and stuff like that for meals, clothing, things of that nature to kind of get them by. I know back in the day, my dad, he was, from the time that he is young and even till, his passing, he loved to party. My dad was a partier. So I do know that, a lot of the stories that I've ever heard of him back in his high school heydays, there's some wild, drugs, rock and roll, sex, my dad and me, we shared a lot of different stories with each other. Probably, not too many stories that a dad and son would share. But as I grew older, my dad and I, we ended up really blossoming into like a really good friendship. I would say that, him being a dad to me, it wasn't, probably the best, father-son relationship, but we definitely, as I became an adult, had a very good father-son friendship. But let's kind of show some pictures to, give you guys a little bit of some background. This is a picture of my mom and dad and me. That's me, the little dude. And then this right here was my grandmother. She's the one that, raised him as a single mom. She did the best she could with 3 kids. And I know life was really rough. Here's another picture of my dad, sister, me. Not the best quality to get, but you guys get the gist of it. For you guys that are listening, sorry about that. If you guys want to check out some of the pictures, I will post them on Facebook to the group, or I will also have them. You can go check it out on YouTube. Anyhow, so back to my dad and me. I kind of got some notes on it. I'm going to go through all the things. But growing up with my mom and dad, I do remember growing up with my mom and dad, and it was not a very good situation. My mom and dad fought a lot. They did not get along very well. So it made things, as a child, it was, very scary at times. I do remember them getting into some pretty serious fights to where my parents had to, call out to, my mom called her dad and he had to come pick her up and all this stuff. So, it was a very volatile relationship, my mom and my dad. And my dad struggled with drug addiction and alcohol, for his whole life. My mom at one time, I know she was a partier, and then, she got really heavily involved in church and things of that nature. So, their past really started to go in different directions until, obviously their marriage failed. And, they decided to get a divorce ultimately. Well, with that situation, it just really destroyed the family. Here we are. There's my sister and myself. And my sister and me, I believe I'm about 10, and she's, around 8, or so, 7, 8. And then, when my parents separate, I end up going and I live with my mom, and I lived with my mom for a while. And then situation living with my mom and my sister, that really got to be a very bad situation to the point where, we get in a really huge fight, and then I end up going and I live with my dad. Well, living with my dad, it was kind of a very crazy situation because, my dad, he wasn't really at this point in time, didn't have a lot of stability in his life. We had gotten a house out in the middle of nowhere, and my dad, he was a construction worker. He did masonry, which is building block walls. And, we live out in the Antelope Valley area. It is super hot out here. And, my dad, my grandpa, all them, they all build block walls, and that's just kind of what they did. I went out there as a little kid with them, and it made me not want to do it. So, and it's also, a rough job because it definitely comes seasonally, and not everybody needs block walls, especially as things get expensive. But, so my dad, his life consisted of, work. And, for that kind of work, you need energy and stuff like that. So one of his, probably bad drugs of choice was, putting stuff up his nose. So unfortunately, years and years and years and years of that, definitely caught up to him. There's a lot of things. I'll get it kind of into more of his health. But living with my dad, back when I was living with my dad, it was definitely different because my dad was always working. And so that left me at home by myself a lot. And, it got to the point where my mom kind of saw this situation going on, and she eventually basically grabbed me out of a football practice. And I've gone into a little bit more depth into some of these stories. If you go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes, I don't want to get too crazy, just in case some of you listen to it. But when my mom ended up taking me and I went and lived with her, I stayed with her for a while. And then my dad and my relationship after that, it was definitely, I didn't get to see him as much anymore. So when I got into high school, my relationship with my dad really was kind of torn, and I didn't get to see him as much. I remember, even on my 16th birthday, he was supposed to come pick me up. He ended up getting himself arrested. I don't recall what it was for, but here I was, waiting for him to come pick me up, and I didn't really find out, until a couple days later what had happened. So, it was kind of rough not having him there for a lot of the sports that I did in high school. I was a wrestler. I played football, so he loved football. Unfortunately, he didn't get to come to a lot of my games because our relationship was very strained around my high school years. But with my dad, it was kind of like me and my dad's relationship was always kind of more like a friendship. When I got into high school and stuff like that, I would party with my dad. I would drink alcohol. I would smoke some marijuana with him. I would party with my dad. Not something that you typically do with your dad. So my dad was kind of at that age where he just wanted to, I feel like he just wanted to live life. He didn't, he lived it under his rules, his way. But, I think trying to, be cool with us and have a relationship with us, he was just trying to keep us there by doing cool things, by, drinking, doing all the things that we thought were, cool as kids. But, that, life with us, that's kind of the big circle of, how we became more of friends. Anyways, we would always hang out in his garage, and, we would have a lot of great times and playing dominoes, playing cards, sitting there smoking weed, drinking some beer or whatever. Just really honestly, having a cool, chill, conversation with them, and, just being able to be myself. That was one thing with my dad that was probably the best thing in the world, is that I was able to be very much myself. I didn't really, have to worry about him judging me. Obviously, he didn't live a perfect life, and he knows that. And, he did the best that he, could. And, unfortunately, my dad, his health really started to decline once he got diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Once he got that, a lot of things started going bad for him. He started getting infections in his foot. They started having to amputate a lot of his toes. He'd get a lot of bad infections in his foot, infections in his body. He really was kind of starting to go in and out of the hospitals and things like that. And he just really, really just started declining. And unfortunately, I want to say it was around November, October timeframe of 2019 is when I really started seeing a major incline in my dad. He had some major health issues a long time ago. My dad did it's like a surgery to shrink your belly and stuff like that. It was like a bypass type of a surgery so he could help him lose the weight. Well, that like whole bypass thing that he got, it disconnected, reconnected into like a different organ. It created so many issues from him. That was kind of like one of the starts of like really what kind of, you know, started wearing him down. And then he ended up having like a bile duct issue where his bile duct was, you know, having issues. I mean, a lot of things were going to the decline. He had congestional heart failure going on, obviously from the years and years of abusing, you know, drugs and alcohol. Just, you know, all these things really caught up. And around the holidays, it was Christmas time. He came over with my stepmom, and I just looking at him, I just kind of was like, wow, this is 2019 Christmas time. I was just looking at him and just, wow. I was just like, my dad is not looking good. And I had my oldest two there, Austin and Michaela, and I pulled them aside and I said, hey, listen, this might be your guys' last Christmas with your grandpa. I mean, he's not looking good. I mean, he was losing so much weight. His color of his skin was looking bad. I mean, just things, you can tell things weren't looking good. And I was telling my, you know, kids to make sure that they, you know, are enjoying his time, missing, don't miss opportunities. And it was, that Christmas was a really cool, special one. We got to play some games and do some things. And my dad and stepmom, they got to dance to one of their favorite songs, Margaritaville. It was a very special moment to watch them dance. I actually have that on video. I'll try to share that moment on the Facebook group. But, what a special moment that was. And then I know I'm kind of all over the place on this. I apologize. I just am trying to make sure I cover everything. I did take some notes and stuff like that. But around January 18th, which was like, I think, a Saturday, I received a phone call from my dad, and I wasn't able to answer it. And he left a voicemail and my dad sounded really horrible on that voice message. It just it wasn't the same dad. He was, just didn't sound right. So I call him back and I'm like, what's going on, Dad? And he was at his worst that I've ever seen in my life. My dad has always been, probably one of the most toughest guys. But that day talking to him, it was a crushing conversation. Just feeling like he was kind of giving up hope because he was kind of losing, functions, bodily functions and stuff like that, waiting to have surgery because they wouldn't have surgery on his bile duct thing until he had infection going on. And part of that was because he's diabetic and, so there's just all these things that were adding up to where he wasn't able to get in for this surgery. And so, talking to him, he just was defeated. And this was the first time in my life I've ever heard him basically kind of just wanting to give up and not really wanting to live anymore. And I was just like, dang. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to drive right over to his house that day. I wanted to go over and see him. My plan was I had already made arrangements and everything to go see him Sunday morning. Well, Saturday evening, I get late in the night, I'm sleeping. I get a call from my stepmom, and she's very upset. And she's like, you need to come to the hospital. And I don't think your dad's going to make it. And you need to come say goodbye. And I'm just like, wow. Oh my gosh. I can't believe this. And at the moment in time when I received this call, I was about 30 minutes away from the hospital. So I called my kids immediately, my two oldest, and I let them know if they wanted me to pick them up and if they wanted to go with me. And of course they did. So I had, 30-minute ride to go before I got to pick them up and think about, wow, I'm going to lose my dad, my best friend. And that really was just sinking into me. It was really rough. 30 minutes. I couldn't even play the music or nothing. I just dead silence driving. Feeling kind of like a zombie. But I pick up my kids, make it over to the hospital. We get there and my dad's pretty much sedated. He's not, he's not with us. He's totally sedated or, he's just, not awake. So we're all there just trying to comfort him, and talk to him. And, we're just, just talking to him and stuff. And me and my stepmom kind of step out a little bit, and my kids are in there talking to him. We were just kind of talking about it, and she's just like, and I'm like, you think he's really not going to make it? And she's like, I don't think so, Brian. She's like, I was talking to him, and then he just went out, and then it seemed like maybe he had a heart attack or something at that point in time. But as we're sitting there talking, all of a sudden, he flatlines. And all these, codes are going off. Everything's going off. My kids are stuck in there. Here comes the medical team. They're running in. My kids basically get stuck in this corner because they can't move. And, everybody's just rushing in and they're sitting there working on my dad and trying to bring him back to life. And, after I would say probably about five minutes or so, it seemed like a long time. It seemed like they had brought him back, or at least they got his, got his vitals back up and going again. My kids, they were very much terrified seeing and watching their grandpa get worked on. And so was I. Seeing my best friend and my dad get worked on. That was pretty rough. So once they get him stabilized, he's in there, and the way everything's going, it sounds like he's snoring, the way he's snoring, but they assured us that he wasn't snoring. They just said, it's the machines that are, doing their things, it's basically making him sound like he's snoring. Because there was part of me like thinking, oh man, good thing he's snoring, because, at least he's snoring, he always snored. But come to find out, after everything, that he was pretty much brain dead and he was pretty much gone. He had a very massive heart attack that basically killed him, and they just were keeping him alive through the machines. So they had basically, told us it's, there's no more, there's just not much more that they can do for him. So they had to make the decision to pull him off of life support. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be in there. There was a lot of people already in there, in the room. His cousins, my stepmom, my sister was there. There was several people in there. I had to hug him and I had to walk out. I have watched too many other people die, and I really didn't want to watch my dad, my best friend, die. And I feel kind of bad that I left him like that. It was kind of the selfish part of me, but I just, man, for the mental sake of it all, I just didn't feel like I could watch my dad, my best friend, pass. It's just, I don't know. I go back and forth with it sometimes, but, my dad, he was, at the end of the day, my best friend, one of the one persons in the world that I could just go to, feel like I can totally be myself around him. No judgments. We had a lot of great trips with each other, and we've gone to Vegas. He's got kicked out of bars. But, we used to do a lot of fun things. And I think the one thing that I do feel bad is that PTSD has always somewhat crippled me in my social anxieties and stuff like that, with going out in public and preventing me from doing a lot of things. My dad used to ask me to, like, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. And man, I would turn him down, just because I didn't like going out to places. I would still hang out with him at his house a lot of times, but there's, when he would be like, oh, let's go do this, let's go do that, I'd just be like, oh, no, man, I don't really want to. Why don't we just kind of hang out here? So, I mean, I do feel, like looking back at it, I do wish I could have done more things with him, Another thing is my dad, I look back at it now, and when I was younger and stuff, he would embarrass the shit out of me. Just do, whatever, wear crazy clothes. But you know what? My dad taught me to not care about what other people think, and that's one thing huge with my dad, is he loved a lot of people. He was a big lover, man. He had a lot of friends, and he cared about a lot of people. That's one thing I can tell you, is my dad talked a lot about his friends and how much he loved his friends. He cherished his friends. So if you guys are watching, any of you guys out there that were my dad's buddies, let me tell you, I know a lot of you guys by your names and stuff like that. I may not know you personally or know your faces, but I do know a lot of you guys by some of the stories my dad would say, because I tell you, he loved his friends. Growing up with his old friends, he grew up on Lost-Wood in Lancaster. That's one thing he talked about a lot. But my dad, he was a great guy. At the end of the day, he lived life how he wanted to live it. He did live it in the very much of the fast lane. He loved drugs, sex, rock and roll, all that stuff. And it all definitely caught up to him. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to his 58th birthday. So he was very young, and I'm quite young, and it's rough, going through a lot of milestones with my kids, like he missed my daughter turning 16, my son turning 16, my daughter graduating, my daughter going into college, all those things, and I do like to hope, and I do believe and think that, he's up there watching over us, and he's still able to catch a lot of this stuff. And Dad, if you are able to hear me and you can see me, man, one of the things I do want to tell you is that I do appreciate you. I love you. And I want to say, I know you gave me a better life than what your dad gave you. And I'm trying to do that for my kids. And I'm hoping that each generation we get better and better. My dad, I feel like he didn't have a dad. He didn't have anyone to look up to reference into being a dad. He was on his own trying to be a dad, who was raised by his mom, and he did the best he could, and all I can do is say I appreciate that. And, none of us are going to be perfect parents. I know I'm not a perfect parent, and I've, made a lot of mistakes, but what I'm trying to do is teach my kids is, hey, let's not make those mistakes. Let's kind of stop this at some generation. Let's not make this a generational thing and keep it going. But, you know, for anybody that's lost a parent out there, I know how rough it is. I didn't know how rough that would be. That's the biggest loss in my life is my dad. And he was my best friend. And, man, something that's very special to me, and we keep kind of in the guest room, is this right here. It's a spiral, and those are his ashes in those spirals. And so there's a little base at the bottom that this goes on and lights up, and we turn it on at night and stuff like that. Keep it on to keep his memory. I'll forever keep my dad, you know, alive. His birthday is May 28th. So on his birthday, we will celebrate his birthday. This year, he would have turned 61. So, you know, we're going to keep on celebrating him as long as I'm alive. My son, unfortunately, my little dude, you know, he was 2-3 years old when my dad passed. So I got to somehow or another keep my dad's memory alive so he can kind of remember or get to know who his grandfather was. And so, you know, he's a great guy. He's made mistakes, but a lot of people in life, we make mistakes. At the end of the day, my dad tried to do better, and he definitely was an amazing grandfather to my kids and to my sister's kids, to, you know, all my stepchildren. My dad was just a very fun, lovable guy. I know he loved his grandchildren, and he definitely was, you know, trying to do better that time around with them all. And as adults, we became the best of friends, like I said. And I don't fault him. I will forever be appreciative of and respect him and love him, and you know, carry on his memory with me for as long as I live. But this is going to go ahead and cut it for this episode. I just thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys were able to bear with that. I know it's probably all over the place. I probably didn't even, you know, share everything that I really wanted to share, but I feel like I got out as much as I could. And like I said, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you guys could share the show, I would absolutely appreciate you guys. Until next time, Roof out.